Now what I want to do on this video, and this is probably the companion video to the one we put up a couple of days ago about buffing out parts. This is a common problem I have because I paint outside. I get a coat of clear and I get dust in it. This is the wind was blowing. I'm not sure you can see every speck of it, but there is definitely dust in that part. Now in this part, the only thing we're going to see is this area here. This is a little fairing baffle. But if you look at that dust, and it could be, there's two things can happen here. And let me just explain this real quickly. When you have the surface that you normally would have from overspray, from spraying with a spray can, or if you're spraying outside, there's always some little dust, because this becomes, the urethane becomes like flypaper for about 2 hours. So getting rid of this and getting a nicely buffed finish on it, well, it's pretty simple. I think it's even simpler because a couple of things. I'm always experimenting with new products and new things. And the last couple of days, what I had in the previous to this, I was using 2000 grit sandpaper for the whole job. I went up and got some 2500. I'm going to get some 3000 too. Now the 2500 grit I had never really used before because it took a little bit longer to do the sanding. But in this case, the time I'm spending sanding, I'm making up for it in less time buffing. I also came across, I didn't come across, this is the medium cut product. I don't think I put this on the last video. 8021. Now, and to be honest, I want to show this. What I always have is, and the way you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to sand, if you're doing a car, let's say, 1500 grit. This is the rough compound. Of course, it has a dedicated pad. Then you would use this. This is the medium cut. Of course, a dedicated pad. And then you would use 8022. This is the final glossy finish. Well, and you never know how this is going to be until you do your own experiments. So what I did, and again, I've been doing pretty much each part of this track bike a little bit different because I'm in a learning curve here of trying some new techniques and some new products. Now in the olden days, this is what we had. I go back doing this into the 60s. You had a drill, a variable speed, and you had all kind of pads that go on this. But what I discovered, and almost by accident, I bought some little groups of pads in Harbor Freight, and one of them is this little, and it snaps right on. It's a little, it looks like fur. Now what I found out though is, number one, you can put a little bit of wax on here, a little bit of compound, a little bit of anything. Or the coolest thing is you can use it with nothing, just the fur, to put a final finish on. So what I did, I went out to the, when I saw how nice this was polishing, after I buff a part, I would take this and just give it a minute or two on there. And I said, well, how about aluminum? Now I have the frame on my FZR is polished aluminum, probably a couple 100 hours of work polishing that frame. I went out there with this and I immediately saw, wow, it just snapped right up. So this was a find and I wanted to share it because these are all things that are relatively inexpensive. Anything from Harbor Freight is almost free when you have the coupon. We're going to, from this point on, do a lot more experimenting with 2500 paper, and like I said, I'm going to get some 3000 paper. But what I really wanted to do is show one part. Now, we know this part is all full of dirt, dust, or whatever. And I always, people that are learning how to paint in my shop, I always tell them, it's real. If you're going to buff a part out, it's not as important. It would save you some work if you had a spray booth. But you know what? If you want to save all the work in the world, just don't paint anything. So step one is I'm going to take this part, and it's loaded with dust. I wanted to show this. And it will take a minute or two longer than if I was doing it with 2000 grit. We're only going to see this side of it for right now. But if I show this in real time, choking on buffing dust. If I show this in real time, now one of the things you could do is old paint. You can take 20, 30-year-old paint, the paints they used years ago, they oxidize. You can get rid of all the oxidation this way, and if you don't overdo it, you won't go through in the corners or edges. But you can do like a real economy restoration on any part, anything that's painted. Now, here's the way I've been doing this. I've held this because this, and then I've just gone to the other corner. I've done it with little pieces. And then I've tried to do, and I took a suggestion from Mark. He said sand in this way and this way. And yeah, maybe it makes it a little bit easier. I don't know. Since I'm so committed to the fact of having everything buffed out and beautiful now, all of these bikes that we painted for Luciano, and I think there's probably 20 bikes by now, we have done various different things to get rid of the dust. But to me, there's no substitute in the world for just when you're totally finished with the job, is do exactly what I'm doing. And because these orbital buffers, see, now this is an orbital buffer. Orbital buffers don't catch an edge. If I was to try to buff this out and I catch an edge, let me just explain this. As this is turning, it's turning this way. So if you have a sharp edge, it catches, just like when you have a part in a lathe. So you have to be real careful with this. Here's the good news about this. You can be a monkey and use this. You can put it on your face. It doesn't hurt. Nothing. It's just easy to use. And if you have an old car, an old motorcycle, an old guitar, an old model airplane, an old anything, this little technique will work. This paint is probably a week old, maybe a little longer. Now, because Najat is learning in the shop here day by day, he's picking up little techniques. Well, we're going to try to shoot some video of the progress he's making on his Ducati. Other people that Glenn, the late Larry DeTuri, these are people that I think everyone, number one, you've enjoyed the time you do it, and when you're done, you have something. You have something that's nice and clean, easy to wipe off. Now let me just see, every once in a while, what I like to do, paper towel, just wipe that side off. Now all I'm doing here is looking if I missed a spot, and I did. There's a little bit of a, I don't want a moon crater, I don't want anything shiny. I want this to be blocked down flat. And again, a 2500 takes just a little longer than if you did it with 2000 or 1500. But the time you save, because the scratches are that much smaller, I think that's the total time you spend. If you just count the total time, you're ahead of the game. Now let me just make sure we're flat here. So now at this point, and this is a good thing to candle it, I want to candle it. I want to look at it and see that I've gotten all the flat spots out of it, which this looks pretty good. This is the only side we're going to see, so we'll concentrate all our effort on this. So from this point on, basically I can get rid of the sandpaper. I can take the orbital buffer, a little bit of this, and again, you don't need a lot. The mistake is always using more than you need. Boy, and in the old days when we buffed out model airplanes by hand, boy, a job like this would take hours and hours and hours. It's amazing now how quick you can do this. Now the best thing is if you can support this with your hand or with something. The edge of the table, your hand, anything. I'm going to show this way that I've used a million times, doesn't even matter. You can, another trick that I've done, not a trick, but when you want to support an odd shaped part, a roll of towels makes a good support. A modern paint is just wonderful to work with. All of the modern paints you buy now, they are just so easy to use. In the old days when you worked with acrylic lacquer and the Imrons of the 70s and 80s, wow. This stuff now. And now Najat has some cool new paint that we've never even used. It's flat clear. I'm just showing different techniques because I'm using this to support it. Now, I don't want to push down any harder. If the orbital buffer starts to slow down, I know I'm pressing too hard. Now, if I was doing a gas tank, let's say I just bought an old Yamaha. I didn't want to repaint it. I just want to spruce it up. I could take the 2500 grit paper, probably in, I'd say, half an hour, you could block sand down the tank. With maybe an hour or two of polishing, assuming the tank didn't have any real dents, I think it would be looking for all purposes like a brand new tank. Now what I do, I always have a microfiber. I look for it because I want to look to make sure I'm not missing any spots. Sometimes when you hold it, you miss one spot. And in this case, I'm going to turn it around. But there's really, if you're doing this, now a lot of times what I do is I'm watching a football game or watching MotoGP, or we got people over the house, or Jose eating donuts or something. So this work, you can do this and you don't even have to look at it while you're doing it. You can look this way, you know, you can, there's no, when you're doing a rotary buffer, you got to watch what you're doing. You can take your finger off, or take your nose off, or take your fillings out or something. But the beautiful part, these buffers are about $15. With a coupon, they come out to less than $12. And when they wear out, in fact, Lauren wore one out on me last year. Lauren, you owe me a buffer. Anyway, it isn't even worth worrying about. It's like pizza pie money. Now, when you get to the point, and this is always a good point here, we have a certain amount of gloss on this. There's always a little bit of gloss. So what I want to do is take the old pad. Now this is going to be, I got to watch what I'm doing here. See how it catches? So I want to catch it with that edge if I can. Just like working a part in a lathe. And again, if I didn't mention, Harbor Freight drill, under $20 with a coupon, probably about $15. They wear out, you burn the brushes out doing this, but you just go buy another one. Now, without even, this is that little fur pit. There's really no wax on this yet. So I have a little rag. Let me get my, because we have a lot of people, including the baby, handling this stuff. Before I do anything, I like to put a little bit of wax on it, just a drop or two of and by the way, anytime you're waxing, Carnauba wax is by far the best. Protects it if you ride in the rain, or if you, God forbid, run over a skunk or something. Now this is what I think is really funny, how cool this is. And again, I haven't spent a lot of time here. Relative to polishing something from the old days. Now, if I were to look at this and I had scratches or little dimples or anything I really didn't like at this point in time, I just go back and repeat the whole thing over again. Go right back to the sanding, in fact. Now, if you look at that really, that is really nice. It's protected by the Carnauba wax, in fact. So, and it's relatively easy to do. Now, because we're in the shop here, let me just show this. I always like to do this. In fact, now you want to be, this is always something. Let me hold it here, and you can watch TV in the port. If you can watch TV in the port, that's always my little test. But anyway, I wanted to show that. That's a nice thing you can do for almost no money. I think we've spent, if you look at your watch, this whole thing took about 10 minutes. Now, I wanted to show this too, because we've been working on, I did several of these parts. I made 2 or 3 little buffing videos. The reason is, an awful lot of my friends, if you look at the Windy YouTube videos, a lot of them are dedicated to paint work. Whether it's model airplane people, the ones that Paul Taylor has put up there, or the motorcycle ones. Now, all of these parts, this one was buffed, of course. Now, there's an awful lot of people that really would like to have a motorcycle that's basically buffed out, cleaned, polished. And the beauty of this is there's no part of this that you have to be a rocket scientist to do. There's no part. It's not like doing machine shop work, a valve job, cam timings, even changing tires where you can do something that's really a problem. Well, with this, and here's the best thing of all, even if this doesn't, if you're not happy with this paint, you can sand it off. You can use paint remover if you got a lot of paint on. Even little parts like this, I found that little fur tool to be very useful, and I wanted to put this on there because I know my friend John Pothier seemed very interested in that. Parts like this, easy parts to do. Our custom windshield that we worked on, and I thought this would add a little touch to the bike. Since it's not a street bike, we don't need a headlight. This part has been fiberglassed over and then painted over. And some of the custom decals, and I think one of the future things we're going to do is make, or at least show some of these, because they've come from a new company that we're using, the company in Texas. I think it's Papilio. I'm not really sure. I got to get all the information, of course, before I do this. But now, what I always enjoy, you know, at the end of the day, and then for me, I get tired earlier than normal, but I always like to stand back, look at the stuff, how it's evolving. We're into this project probably 2 months now, and what I try to do is anything I learn along the way, share it with people. I always try to pick up tips from other people, and most of all, that's when you can put it all on a little video, somebody around the world can watch it. But this seemed to be, in my way of thinking, just a little bit of an easier way to do it than the way we did it. And every time we do it, we try to come up with something just a little bit better. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Share the link with anybody who likes to paint, likes to buff, or they just want to learn something. And thanks for watching.